Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Wherever you are and whenever you're watching this, I hope you enjoy and maybe even learn something from my presentation today that is centered around the two listed articles. But before jumping into the meat of the presentation, there's a few things I'd like to introduce first. Hi, my name is Nathan Hess. I'm a first-year biomedical sciences student here at ASU, and I'm loving my time here. I got a little more for you to read, but the only truly important piece of information I have to share is that I'm just finishing my study of the second semester of general biology. Some of the main topics we've covered over the semester relate to ecology, theories and understanding of evolution, and our human impact. The most pertinent information that I've been taught in terms of the article we'll be looking at today has been an understanding of evolution, specifically what it is and what it isn't. The purpose of this presentation is to compare the reported information in a news article to the true content of a published peer-reviewed scientific article, essentially to see what they did right and where the news article might have gotten off track. Flowers. They may interest you, they may not. While they are an important piece of this article, the real focus of our discussion today has to do with a concept brought up in correlation with a recent observation of a particular flower, something they call abrupt evolution. To make this as simple and clear as possible, we're going to break it down into 3 or 4 basic parts. First, the content of the article and what can be acknowledged as true. Second, all the things we read in the article that should immediately raise our suspicion. Third, what evidence we have in the primary article that disproves false claims in the news article, and then we'll wrap things up. Okay, let's start with the people behind what we're going to be looking at today. Isabel Luz is the author of the news article. UCSB scientists discover example of abrupt evolution. Scott Hodges and Zachary Cabin are the scientists behind the study. There were several other people involved, but both in Luz's article and in the scientific report, these 2 scientists are credited with doing the majority of the research. The flower, the source of the observations, is the columbine flower, also known by its scientific name as Aquilegia caerulea. The wild type, the previously more common variation and more original form of this flower, is shown on the right. You can see it has 5 purple sepals and 5 white petals. The petals attract more pollinators since they carry nectar with them. Meanwhile, the sepals do not. This is one of the first things that Luz was correct in mentioning in her report. The physical description and differences between these 2 variations of the columbine flower. The next was her association with mutation as a piece of what makes up an evolutionary change. A final important thing I'll bring up that she correctly communicated is the tendency for most mutations to be detrimental. Luz said, usually a mutation of a homeotic gene is bad news, but every once in a while, one of these unique mutations might end up being beneficial to the organism. While there are some verifiably true portions to this news report, we're now going to turn attention to the parts of the article that present problems for its readers. There are 3 main problems with the information in this news article. First and foremost, the concept of a sudden evolutionary change which defies known science is way off the mark. These other 2 claims, that these discoveries go against Darwin's theory and that all mutations are bad, are both just as false. If you know the real definition of evolution, any of these claims are clearly not true. If we take a look at the scientific article itself, it's made clear that these changes seen in the Aquilegia population do not oppose our definition of evolution as we know it, but in fact, fit perfectly within its bounds. Put simply, the accepted definition of evolution is a genetic change in the makeup of a population over time. What we see with Aquilegia is simply an example of natural selection, just happening at a slightly faster rate than some other species and in some other cases. The mutant variant without petals, and therefore decreased levels of nectar, is much less likely to be eaten, experienced herbivory themselves. So though they lose a reproductive advantage, their increase in survivability was significant enough to give them a greater overall fitness. This in turn has led to a greater presence of this genotype in the population over time. In the article, Luz is vague enough in her descriptions to make it sound as if all this change has only occurred in the last 3 years or much less, by not really giving a defined timeline. She only mentions when the study was conducted and the excitement of those conducting it. In reality, and in the scientific article, we see that the mutant version was first observed over 100 years ago, in 1897. So the currently observed spread of this mutant has really happened over a much longer time frame than is implied in the news article. Even then, it's not like the wild type of the columbine flower has disappeared just yet. The graph shown above was taken from Cabin and Hodges' report, and it shows the physical location in meters of where the wild type, the red dots, and mutant, the blue dots, could be found. Here you can say they occupy the same space, but you can also see that they're both fairly equally prevalent. In the future, it's possible that the mutant will become the more common genotype, but for now, that line has not been crossed. This is the main takeaway from what is being mistaken in the article. Though she also states that superfast functional changes go against Darwin's theory, this claim is never elaborated on, and as we've already discussed, these observed changes neatly fit within the requirements of the theory of evolution. Finally, a quote was included in this article that was either taken out of context or is simply incorrect. Scott Hodges said, "We did not have a good example of something positive coming from a single genetic change until now." End quote. It is true that most mutations are detrimental, something that is acknowledged earlier, but it's erroneous to suggest that every mutation is. If that was true, natural selection would not exist, evolution would not exist, and several other of the fundamental concepts of biology would have to be rewritten. This presentation was made in the context of Bio 182, General Biology for Majors 2, Arizona State University, spring semester of 2022, and was made using a template provided by SlideScale. Here are the rest of the resources used in this presentation. Thanks for watching.